The doctor is in.
The doctor is in, and it is, we've experienced clinical trials, National Clinical Trials Day.
Yep. It was last week, so we're a little
Mhm.
late, but we're celebrating it today, and we have some badass women to
I
talk about.
love it. And I
Yeah.
think it's such an important topic, not just for one day of the year, not just for one day of the month, but for people who are facing, disease, especially things like cancer. The conversation about clinical trials needs to be an ongoing one. And it needs to be, in my mind, a conversation that evolves. Because when I was growing up, my grandfather grew up in South Carolina, and some of his relatives were from Tuskegee, Alabama. And he had a lot to say about doctors and what they were and what they weren't in clinical trials. And my entire family, my whole life, even in 2021, I can remember growing up hearing about doctors experimenting on Black and brown people and how that affected our view of the healthcare system. And, especially when we get a disease like cancer. And so I think that we got to have this conversation, but then we got to grow and mature and evolve this conversation. And our guests here tonight are going to help us do just that. So, Ricky, who do we have tonight?
We have badass Dr. Melissa Davis, our favorite scientist who's at Weill Cornell. We have badass Sheila McGlown, a meta thriver, just like doing her thing, talking about trials, trying to educate people. We have badass Tammy Denise Carey's touch, who's like going to talk about her experience with the trial. And we have badass Stephanie Walker, who's a meta thriver too, who's doing a really cool project to get more metastatic Black people into clinical trials. But Mo, we just did this research, right? This qualitative research. We're in the middle of our big research study. And we learned so much about what people are afraid of. And one of the things that was pervasive in all of the conversations was, I'm going to get the sugar pill and die. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I know that we have a lot of bad history, and we have a lot of trust issues, and we have a lot of even stuff like transportation and time and all those things. But I was so surprised to find out about people not really understanding the concept of standard of care and the concept of, like what really happens in a clinical trial. So we have a lot of work to do to educate. And I knew that already. We knew that we had to educate more, but now it's even more important, I think, because it's really kind of basic things that people need to understand. Because you know how I feel. If we don't do the research, we're going to keep dying. We don't have the drugs that work for our bodies. We don't have any data to know that our bodies are going to be, are going to work with these drugs that are out here. And we have to figure that out. I mean, we know that there's stuff out here, but it's like 3 to 5% participation, depending on the source you use, of Black women in trials. And so until we get the science right and do the scientific work and understand what works on our bodies, we're going to keep dying at a 71% higher risk, and all those horrible, devastating statistics that we hear every day. So the other thing we learned is that a lot of Black breasties don't even know how severe the disease is for Black women. So they go to chemo in the room with them. They see, the white people, the Asian people, the Hispanic people, and they see kind of, every color in the doctor's office. But they don't know that our mortality rate is 42% higher. Our recurrence rate is 39% higher. And so even just educating about that, because those facts alone should help us understand the necessity for the science. So, let's everybody introduce themselves, because Melissa's title is too long for me to even say.
Okay, and then I have questions I want to ask you about what you said. So let's start. We're going to start with Dr. Davis. Dr. Melissa.
Thank you for inviting me. I love coming here. This is the only place I get to be a badass, So this is awesome. I love being here with you beautiful women. So my titles, I'll give you two. I'm the scientific director of an organization called the International Center for the Study of Breast Cancer Subtypes, headquartered at Weill Cornell Medicine. And then I'm also an ethnicity and cancer scholar at the New York Genome Center here in New York as well. All of my research currently is involving looking at disparities in outcome in breast cancer primarily, but we also look at gynecological cancers and prostate cancer. I'm more interested in the biological determinants, so tumor biology, why cancers are more aggressive in women of a certain ethnic or ancestry background, and also how sort of the social history of race groups feeds into tumor biology. That's me.
Badass.
Yeah, if you're not being called that in other areas, I think we need to change the people who you're around, because I didn't hear anything that wasn't considered all around badassery. So I'm just saying.
Right. Okay, badass Sheila.
Hi, my name is Sheila McGlown, and I am a 11-year metastatic breast cancer survivor, thriver. I am a 25-year Air Force veteran as well. And currently, I am on a clinical trial, and I've been on a clinical trial since July of 2018, and it's working. And I'm here to tell you about my experience on a clinical trial. I do have faith in research, and research saves lives. So hopefully I'm doing my part to help people understand, or help Black women understand, that clinical trials are important, and it starts with researchers asking us. It starts with our oncologists telling us about clinical trials. And once we continue to educate, we can continue to get more Black women and men involved in clinical trials.
Cool. Badass Tammy.
Hello, everyone. I am Reverend Tammy Denise. I'm a 16-year breast cancer survivor, and I'm a pastor, and I am a I call myself a trauma assassin when we're dealing with racism and mothers who have lost children to gun violence. But for today's purpose, I'm also the co-founder of Carrie's Touch, a breast cancer organization that's based in Sacramento, California, and I'm the co-PI for Project SOAR, Speaking Our African American Realities, in partnership with UCLA. So I'm also here today to talk about my story of participating in a clinical trial to help advance research to advance outcomes in Black folks diagnosed with breast cancer.
Another badass with a lot of titles. Steph.
Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for inviting me. My name is Stephanie Walker. I live in North Carolina, and not considered really a badass compared to these women. I'm a fairly new retired RN of 40 years. Critical care has been my thing. Also, my last 15 years was with hospice care, so I'm very familiar with death and dying and the process, and a big advocate for palliative care, hospice care, all of those around. But today, we're talking about clinical trials, and as a nurse of 40 years, didn't know too much about them. I knew they existed. I knew there were people that were in them, but I thought they were last-ditch effort. I wasn't ever offered one. But now that I am the project lead of an initiative called Become, trying to find out why we Black women and men don't want to enter a clinical trial. We have to do it. These treatments are going to be made for us.
Wow. Let me start off this round of questioning and ask all of our breasties. If someone were to ask you where to go to find the standard of care for breast cancer treatment, do you know, and do you think most women know, most patients know do they even know what the standard of care is? So, because we were talking about people think they're getting less than the standard of care, right? But people don't know what the standard of care is, right? And where to find it. Is that, can anybody comment on that?
I think it would be really good if Melissa kind of explained the whole concept of a trial, and kind of what is standard of care? How does it work? Because I don't think people know about it. I mean, from what the data that we have, it's a foreign topic, and it's not, we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think
Absolutely.
has a really great explanation of a clinical trial that I think will be really helpful to everybody. So.
Yeah, I mean, so just like Dr. Mo said, though, I mean, it starts with standard of care. So standard of care is defined by what we know is currently the state of the art. Like, what is the best treatment for the type of diagnosis that you have right now? And we know this because of clinical trials that occurred years and years ago. And so, as we develop technologies, drugs, molecules, methods of even delivering the same old drug, but we just deliver it differently so that it's targeted to a site, for instance, or maybe the machinery or the hardware is upgraded. All of these things have to be tested for safety, and that is usually in the context, in the framework of a clinical trial. Now, this is really important, especially with the history that we already know, right? The abuse, the very, well-earned mistrust that minority populations, especially in this country, have around, research when it wasn't so tightly regulated. But that was last century. Okay, so this is a time where every step of the process, so clinical trials occur in phases. Every step of the process has a safety outcome that must be met in order to move forward. But even before anything happens to a human, so for instance, if we're talking about a new drug, a new molecule that, based on like my research, we found these genes that are more highly expressed, or, a marker in a tumor that we think is driving the way the tumor is growing or proliferating, or the rate that it gets bigger. We've discovered that in my lab in the basic science, because we were studying it in a petri dish. And so now we think, if we can knock out this gene, we can probably stop the growth of the tumor. So that's the first point of discovery. And that would be called the preclinical phase of clinical trials, where we're in petri dishes looking in cells, and then we maybe move into a mouse model. If we have a drug molecule that we want to test, we have to first put it in a model before we can ever put it into a human. And in those preclinical trials, that's also when we test, the first line of toxicity. If we give it to a mouse and it kills a mouse, then it's never getting into a human, right? And so those preclinical phases, as I mentioned in another meeting with you ladies, that I have to be careful with the mice, right? I mean, the committee that sits to protect the mice is oftentimes more rigorous than the committee that sits to protect the humans. And maybe it's because of PETA, I don't know. But I have to have a special protocol in order to give a mouse cancer and to give it the treatment that I think will cure it. And then we start with the human safety. So phase one, is really going to be a small number of people where we're just wanting to see what are the effects of giving this particular drug, but we're not going to give it instead of standard of care. We're going to give it in addition to standard of care. And most likely we're only going to give it to people whose standard of care is not working for, right? So if the standard is doing well for a patient, then there's no reason necessarily, to give them additional treatment. But we know that the standard that we have currently doesn't work for everyone. And it doesn't work as well as it can for certain types of tumors, which is why it's important, to broaden our arsenal, right, of medication, of opportunities for survival. And then after phase one, and I'll say too, like there's a lot of monitoring, right, in a patient who's on a clinical trial. I mean, you're probably going to get sick of your doctor or your nurse like checking in with you. They're going to give you some really regimented guidelines of how they're going to, look for the side effects that they may anticipate because of the preclinical studies, right? And then in phase two, we expand the number of people, and then we decide like how much of the drug should we give, right? So this is like the dosing phase where, in the first phase, we started with a certain amount. In this phase, now we're going to test whether or not a little more or a little less is just as effective and still a safety issue, right? So how much can we give her or him to reach the level of efficacy that we need without reducing, survivorship, or, weighing, whether or not, again, whether or not it's safe. And that's usually maybe 100 patients at the most, right, in phase two. Phase three is now we're going to increase the number. We you know, checked all the boxes. It seems to be safe. It's working. Okay, we have an effect, because if it's not working, even if it doesn't make you sick, if it's not working, if it's not improving the outcome, then it's also not going to move forward. So then in phase 3, we start weighing, you know, the benefit versus the risk. It's probably going to be a longer, you know, time point. We're going to open it up to multiple places. And then that's when, if all goes well, it'll be, quote, FDA approved. Now, FDA approval also, there's another phase right behind that. So FDA approval just simply means, okay, the Federal Drug Administration says that it's okay to distribute this drug, but it's only going to be given still in the confines of a phase 4 clinical trial before it becomes standard of care, right? So in phase 4, you know, that's when, again, because it's a broader population, the premise is it should be a larger diversity. We should see not only, you know, ethnic and racial diversity, but other biological diversity, comorbidities, people who have, you know, other chronic disorders, different types of subtypes, if you will, of breast cancer, depending on the drug. And then it would reach standard of care. And then the example that I gave was that one of my colleagues at Tuskegee, ironically enough, has developed a drug for prostate cancer. And so this is, in this year is when he has started clinical trials in humans. Okay, but Dr. Yates has been working on this molecule since I met him, which was like a dozen years ago. And so this is a very tedious process from basic science discovery. He saw that, you know, immune cells were behaving in prostate cancer in a certain way in people of African descent. He discovered the molecule on the immune cells that's, you know, driving the tumor. He worked with a chemist to create a molecule. They tested it in mice, and now, just now, they're starting to go into clinical trials. But I just want to emphasize that, you know, at every stage, safety is, you know, the key concern, and we are not allowed to replace what is already the standard of care for whatever we're testing. And I'll stop
Wow.
there for
No, that's
discussion.
Wow,
fantastic.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's a great explanation.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you for that. So, Mo, did you know that, well, I'm gonna let Tammy tell you her story, but who took Adriamycin, the Red Devil? Like, we all did, right? I took it, right? It was not fun. Well, guess who was in the clinical trial? Tammy, tell your story, babe.
Wow, Dr. Davis, I agree with Dr. Mo. You got to get in some circles that understand and acknowledge your badassery, because you
Right.
are for sure a badass.
Mhm.
For sure. I mean, and she was taking me back to my experience of when I was listening to my researchers when the clinical trial was being presented to me, because I had a lot of questions. I was like those women, Dr. Mo, that you're talking about. It's like, okay, well, what do you mean? Ricky, I was like, you know, what is standard of care? You know, how is this all going to come into play? And I asked my oncologist when he presented the opportunity for me to participate in a clinical trial, how are Black women responding to these drugs? Because Dr. Melissa, my trial was a stage 4 trial. We were testing the efficacy of these certain drugs, adriamycin and Cytoxan, being administered every 14 days versus what was at that time the standard of care as every 21 days in premenopausal women. And, you know, I didn't understand. All I knew was Tuskegee. And, you know, and I started asking these questions, and to my dismay, my oncologist actually said, you know, he didn't know how Black women were responding to these drugs. And I said, unacceptable. And from that moment until where I am today, I began educating myself, understanding clinical trials, and understanding the need for Black people to be part of clinical trials. Like I said earlier, I didn't make the decision to see my grandkids. I didn't make the decision to see my kids graduate from high school. I made the decision because I wanted us to be able to advance research so that we can advance more positive outcomes for Black women surviving cancer, because as Ricky stated, the statistics were staggering, and there wasn't a lot. You didn't see people like Sheila and Stephanie and Ricky out front on, there was no social media back then, but you didn't see us in the news or pictures of us surviving this thing. Everything that came my way told me I would be dead within 5 years of my diagnosis, because I was early stage, I was young, I was 39 when I was diagnosed. It was an aggressive cancer that had already spread. And, these doctors are saying, hey, we're going to throw everything at you but the kitchen sink to try to save your life. And that included, looking at this clinical trial of this drug being administered every 14 days. And I said, sign me up. And from that time, I sat down with a person like a Dr. Melissa, and we went over every page of those 32 pages of possible side effects to understand what it might mean, from the most common side effects to the least common side effects, from just what they were seeing at that time with women. And if my doctor said to me, I don't know how Black women are responding to this drug, I figured I'm getting in, because you're going to have one. I don't know how many Black women were in the trial at that time, but I just said, I got to get in, because Black women are critical to society. And for us to just be dying unnecessarily was not okay with me. And I'm sorry?
I said, hello, thank you.
But I needed something to understand how and why we were dying more from a disease that had women running across finish lines, burning their bras, raising their hands, talking about, I'm a survivor. And I'm told from day one that I probably wouldn't survive. That wasn't okay then, and it's not okay now. And that's why I have been invested in research and clinical trials for the last 16 years.
So a couple things. One, when I talk to patients about what we call dose-dense chemotherapy, that you are one of the people who participated in the trials looking at that, at the changing of the cycle from 3 to 2. And I kind of feel like you're a celebrity a little bit, and I'm a fangirl on you when I talk to my patients about it. So there's that. But two, I guess 3 questions. 2, how helpful is it to know the statistics surrounding Black women's breast cancer? Is it something that is a source of empowerment to most women, or is it something that contributes to the sense of, well, maybe my outcome's not going to be good anyway? And how do we balance that as physicians? Because when I talk to patients, give me some advice so that I can help to balance out giving a patient enough information versus making them feel like they don't have a lot of hope. And people who might be watching may be thinking the same thing.
Why give up? Why give up? I mean, you've been here this long. Why would you just want to say, I quit? I don't know. Even on sometimes, I've had dark days. I have had those days where I really contemplated suicide. But then again, I thought, shit, who's going to get my stuff?
Right.
What they gonna do with my stuff? They gonna take my stuff someplace? But why? I don't want anybody to ever feel like they're not worth it, because you are. You could say good morning to somebody going into, I hate Walmart, and that could make a whole difference in their whole day. So, I've tried to always remain positive from the time that I was diagnosed. I had made a decision at that moment that I was going to remove all the negative vibes in my life. And God knows, being a hospice nurse, you see death and dying all the time, but hell, I didn't want to go there no time soon. So I want to be a Sheila. That's who I'm trying to be, like a Sheila. I want to be badass like Sheila, because I've only been diagnosed for almost 6 years in July. So don't give up. Shit, there's too much to do. There's too many things we need to do.
Right?
Sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was right.
I would add to that too. As Black women, let me speak for myself, but I think this is true. I can say it's true for my mom and my aunts. Bad news isn't new to us. Like we're always given the bleak outcome or the bleak outlook, the bleak prognosis, what we can't do, what we can't accomplish. Based on the statistics, whatever the causes are. I would say I'm facing that same, bleak outlook as a patient from a scientific perspective, right? Like, I hear all the time that it's not going to work. The community is, what do they call the Black community? What's the buzzword? Hard to reach. Like, what do you mean? We're
Hard
right here. We're right here. I think that we don't have enough information about diversity in breast tumors and how they behave in different women and why they behave differently in different women. And I think that's what has really driven some of the disparities that we see. And so some of those statistics that you hear come from a time when there weren't people like Lisa Newman on the scene or Dr. Mo on the scene, who, we see this and, we like like this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. We have a Black oncologist, a Black surgeon in Brooklyn, South Asian surgeon in Queens. I think representation matters.
Yes, it
So that
does.
when you talk about the statistics, give it to me straight, doctor, like, why is it like this for us? And I think, they can give you hope in saying, well, we know why, at least these are the lists of things that we think were the barriers, in the past. And so we're going to pay close attention to those and make sure we overcome those barriers for you.
Hmm.
For sure.
Talk to me about that transition from fear to something else. Because Tammy, it sounds like, Reverend Tammy, it sounds like you kind of went into it like, you know what, I'm about to make this thing count. If I have to go through this, it's going to mean something. And not everybody has that mentality. So how do you go from feeling terrified, I might die, what's going to happen to my kids, what's going to happen to my stuff, to something else? What can people begin to do on the inside? What type of work do they need to do, or conversations do they need to have, or prayers do they need to pray to go from that first place to that empowered place?
Dr. Mo, I want to respond to I want to go back a little bit to that first question you asked about what can physicians do. I think from a place, Malcolm X said and Malcolm X said this, a zillion years ago, that Black women are the most disrespected, unprotected persons in America. And that programming has remained with our women. So when our women come into a doctor's office, and especially a Black female physician's office, for me and the patients that we serve at Carrie's Touch, what has been important is for them to feel valued. Because you're right, I'm an anomaly and I get it. I didn't know that at the time. It was survival of the fittest for me my entire life. So by the time I was 39, I had already learned how to fight to survive, and I was going to win. I knew I had to be the toughest, the baddest, the strongest to win in life, period. But everybody isn't there, and I get that. And so helping our women just feel seen, just feel heard, and feel valued can empower them to even want to live, to even want to move from fear. And then providing some basic education around the stuff that Dr. Davis shared with us about clinical trials. Don't go too deep. It's too much, it's too big, because we blank out and we can't hear all of it, but just enough to say, sis, I'm trying to save your life. I want to save your life. I want to partner with you in saving your life. Will you help me? And letting them know that you're in, that they can count on you. When that researcher sat down with me, she scheduled 30 minutes to sit down with me to go over these 32 pages. 4 hours later, and they had ordered lunch, we were still there.
Wow.
But
Wow.
I knew she was invested. She was in. And so it's stuff like that that helps our women shift from language that has been pre-programmed and embedded in us that we are not valued, that we are not protected and that we are not, and that we are always the first ones on the sacrificial, as the sacrificial lamb. And to say, we're done with that programming, reprogram. Let's reset our minds on life. I don't talk a lot about death in the work that we do. We talk about life because we don't hear that. We don't hear that we're worthy of living.
Woo.
So I forgot your other question. Don't give the preacher a mic.
The doors of the church are open. We need to send around an offering plate on
And
that
don't
one.
let me take a text on you.
We're gonna send around an
About
offering
to say
plate on
she
that
is
one because
preaching.
that is some real wisdom, and those are some pearls, because I think you're right. It does speak to the heart of what we see and what we hear and what we feed ourselves. And if we're not feeding ourselves the right thing, if our doctors are not feeding us the right information in the right context, it can create a sense of powerlessness. It can create a sense of fear, or continue that sense of fear rather than empowering a patient. So that's great wisdom.
Yep, I think Sheila was empowered by her doctor. Were you empowered by your doc, Sheila?
Yeah, my doctor, I had a fourth progression in July of 2018 in my fourth rib. And just a little backstory, my mom died of metastatic breast cancer in 2004. Little did I know that metastatic meant stage 4. I'm like, well, that's the same word, and like Pastor Tammy said, I didn't know there were 4 stages. I knew my mom died from it, but the commercials, you didn't see Black women on the commercials or anything like. So I didn't know. I thought I was doing the walks. I did my just duty for breast cancer. But when I was diagnosed 5 years later, I was active duty military. I'm like, man, this is a whole different world. And it's how many subtypes of breast cancer? And what does HER2 mean? And, different things. But I went into the clinical trial and, when I had the progression, my doctor said, well, you can go back on, Taxol, Taxotere, what you've been on. She said, but I want you to try this clinical trial. So I was like, okay. And she sat down and she explained it to me. Then she called the clinical trial coordinator in and we talked about it. And like she said, the informed consent is like 29, 30 pages, which I think could be shorter. Can you do it as an app so I could take it home, think about it, read it? There are so many things that could be changed about clinical trials, but that's another hour. But, and, I talked to her, and me and my doctor, we've had this 11-year relationship. And she said, yes, I want you to try it. But like you said, the standard of care, I got to go next week to get my eyes checked. I get my heart checked 2 or 3 times before I get the drug, after the drug, and then I got to wait 3 hours to get my heart checked again. So the standard of care is amazing because they're checking my blood work. They're checking every single, if I say that, whatever, they're going to check it, So, but I decided, never did I think that I was going to get a sugar pill. I did my my research saves lives, and it wasn't a last resort. I had a progression and my doctor said, hey, let's try it. And I trusted my doctor. I was like, God would not have given me this doctor if he didn't think that I was, she wasn't good for me. And like Pastor said, they gave me 3 to 5 years. And I was just like, that's not what God got for me. I said, we gonna fight this thing, in July of this year to be 3 years. Now, who would have thought this Black girl from Cleveland that this clinical trial would last for 3 years? I'm sure, I don't know what they thought, but it has, because of my doctor and God's grace. But, I have learned to just not, even if I sat and worried about it, I get scans every 6 weeks. Just imagine I got to go in like, oh my God, it's a progression or whatever, but I just learned that, even if I sat and worry about it, it's still not going to change the outcome. So I'm gonna enjoy my life. And that's what I decided to do. I could sit 2 and 3 days and worry about it, but whatever the MRI or the CT scan say, that's what it's gonna say. So yeah.
I just had a light bulb moment, Sheila. Did you just say that having more scans and having more attention and having more medical team alleviates your stress, because when patients, get diagnosed, every scan is it's anxiety, every pain is cancer, every headache is brain meds. You know what I mean? And so what I just heard you say was probably so powerful, in that you said that the more attention and the more scans I get, the more reassured I am. Right. And it's different. Tell me about that, because I think that's a point that we need to talk about with our breasties, because they have so
Yeah.
much anxiety surrounding just routine scans, that they think to get more scans is going to make it worse.
No, and like I said, it's not going to change the outcome of what's going to happen. Now, before I used to call my doctor like 2 hours later. What did it say? What did it say? And now it's just like, okay, she'll call. If it's bad, it's bad. What can I do? But I'm about to go on TJ Maxx. I'm about to get this comforter I see, because, I have learned that, I'm not just, cancer tried to kill me, but it's not. I refuse to let it kill my joy and my happiness. I refuse. Because if it did, like here, I always say we defeating cancer now because we're educating so many people. Now, either 1 or 2 or 10 people, hopefully more, will go to their doctors and say, hey, I heard Ricky or I heard Dr. Mo talk about a clinical trial. That could lead to something bigger, and, and I say we're defeating cancer just by educating people, So I will continue to use my platform, especially about clinical trials. And I was telling somebody today that we've been overlooked for so long. You can't just push it on us. You have to educate us,
Right, right.
You go to
Right,
conferences,
right.
you see Black women, back in 2009, 2010, I was going to conferences. I'm like, well, where are the Black women? And then they would have seminars like we'll be in a separate room, women of color. It's like, no, what? Like, no, that's not the way it works.
I want to hear the
So
whole story. Right.
yeah, it's just like, no, this is not the way it works. So, like I said, I would just continue. Hopefully, the nausea is bad, but my doctor, she worked with me because I was like, I want to get off. This nausea is just too bad. And she sat me down. She said, Sheila, whatever I have to do to keep you on this trial, I'm gonna do. And she actually bought in a pharmacist, and we now can control the nausea. It's still, iffy, but she actually, she took an investor, of my nausea. Something minor to her was major to me because it affected my quality of life. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Sheila, talk about what you said about last resort, because we heard that a lot in the research too, that, well, a trial is something you do, as a last resort. And
No,
versus click stuff off. Like, I'm not going to take the Trodelvy. I'm going to save that till I'm really sick, which is not the way to do it.
no, that's the first thing my doctor said was, Sheila, this is not a last resort. And I want people to know it's not a last resort. It was just something that I chose and something that I wanted to give back to Black women. Right now, the FDA fast tracked it, and it's actually FDA approved. So women are actually getting this drug because of the 236 participants on this clinical trial. And, I said I wanted to leave my imprint, even when I was talking to my family, it was like, well, why are you on this experimental drug? It's like, this is not an experimental drug. Then I had to explain it to them. No, it's, it's a clinical trial, and it's saving my life, So it's all about educating, even educating the Black community about clinical trials. Going into, I go to a research hospital, but what about community hospitals that don't, or I'm a veteran. What about going into hospitals like that, helping them understand, helping their patients understand about clinical trials? Are they getting, the same type of standard of care that I'm getting, or are they learning about clinical trials? So my mind is always going because
I love that.
Sheila, you were
because-
talking about
so many things I want to do, but yeah, what about people that can't, like I said, community hospitals that can't go to a research hospital.
Right.
And my doctor, she's in charge of clinical trials. So, but, it's just me just continue, and all of us just continue to educate the Black community about it, because, it's they're so important and they're saving lives. They're, research saves lives, so.
Yeah.
I have a brother that went through clinical trial, and I didn't know as a teenager what it meant at the time. And as a nurse, I always thought that clinical trials were the last resort. But I found some of my mom's information on my brother about a month ago. And my brother was in a clinical trial at the National Institute of Health for methotrexate. And I'm sure you guys have heard of that medicine. And he was 10 years old. And he was being treated for ALL, which is a leukemia. So he was in a clinical trial at the NIH, and I found all the paperwork where he was getting all this blood work and all these X-rays. And back then, you didn't do a scan. He had bone marrows really frequently. And I remember as a teenager being in a room one time when he had one, and I thought it was the most horrific thing that, and that made me want to become a peace. But clinical trials have been around for years, and my brother passed away in 1978. So, we didn't know about him. Was it a bad thing for him? No, it gave him, 3 years on his life. And he actually lived 10 after being diagnosed at the age of 3. So I have that to lean on now.
So it runs in the family is what you're saying.
Right.
In the sense that that same spirit of wanting to know more and to do more and to use the evidence and not just take what's given to you and what's presented to you. That's something that, that's something we can learn, right? That's something we can unlearn too. And I think that that's really the work that needs to be done. Dr. Davis, how do you get, how do you do outreach? What does your outreach look like? And how do you begin to educate women about this? And, where do you go and who do you talk to?
So I'm going to throw that back at you, Dr. Mo, in a second. But I think, first of all, I go where I'm invited. So, by virtue of where I am, which is, the hospital system that I work in here in New York, we, have a very broad, catchment, if you will. So that's just the population of patients that walk in our door. But we have community engagement partners here in New York where, I may give a talk similar to this for like another patient advocacy group that is geared towards helping Black women or women of color. So the Share Network or Sisters Network, for instance. I also promote on, social media, things like that. But I want to sort of flip it a little bit, right? Because under enrollment in clinical trials for Black women and women of color is a problem, right? And one of the things Sheila has said, even Tammy has said, is that they were introduced to this option by their clinician, right? And one of the things Sheila said was she's at an academic institution. So if you come to my institution, you may get to meet me. And I'm going to be that woman sitting in the room for 4 hours going over every detail, any question you have, for me, down to your genetic ancestry, right? But then if you go maybe 10 blocks south and you're getting cancer treatment at another institution, you're not going to meet me. You're not going to see me. And I don't like that.
Wow.
I don't like that. I want to be able to talk to anybody who needs to be talked to or have a conversation with anyone who needs to have a conversation. But it's not up to me, really. Like you both pointed out, I think, and you can tell me to be quiet, Dr. Mo, but I think, one of the things that we're starting to do is realize that not only the patients need to be educated about clinical trials and disparities, some of our clinical healthcare workers and our clinical clinicians also need some motivation to take it to the next level with some of their, patients of color, right? Because they don't know walking in the door, like you said, what does standard of care mean? What is triple negative breast cancer? Does the standard of care work for the type of triple negative breast cancer I have? do you even know what type of triple negative breast cancer I have, doctor?
Mm,
Doctor, medical oncologist, you know? And
mhm.
so I think that, you know, one of the things I'm starting to do, like literally tonight, I'm writing a grant proposal where instead of just having an intervention where I'm teaching the patient about genetics and trying to, you know, get them excited about it, I'm also like reaching back and saying, hey, you know, doctor from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, you know, we were starting to see more Black women come into this clinic. Do you know that there are health disparities? Do you know that, you know,
Ooh-wee.
women of
Come on.
color are getting variants of unknown significance, but that doesn't mean it's insignificant. You know,
Wow. Right.
I need you to pay attention to the work that we're doing and give her a chance, you know. Don't just use what you have conveniently in store. I think, you know, let's guide her towards some of these clinical trials, you know, that maybe aren't even open in our hospital. You know, we have to be
Mhm.
open to collaborate and allow, you know, more, you know, help. As Ricky said earlier, you know, we need to get some help, you know. So that's in a nutshell. But Dr. Moore, I wanted to ask you, you know, as I'm writing this proposal, I'm wondering how are my counterparts in the clinic going to feel about me
Mhm.
trying to corral them and share this information with them? Like, you know,
Wow.
how do you handle um this aspect of your
I love this question and I love what you're doing because one of the things that I've been saying to Ricky since we started Touch was that we got to get the clinicians more involved because between the patient and the drug is the doctor. And if the doctor is not checking for it, if the doctor doesn't have the resources, if the hospital doesn't have the trial, then that patient automatically is discounted from participating in certain things. And so that link is essential. And you're absolutely right in that, you know, when patients get care, and 80% of cancer patients get their care at Black cancer patients get their care at community hospitals, which means that the work really does need to begin there. Now, how they're going to feel about it on the subject of genetics, I think everybody is interested. It's hot right now. We all want to know what's in our genes and what we can do to prevent and what do we inherit because we don't all know our family histories. And, you know, we are looking for the traces of who we are and where we came from. We don't know all our her stories, right? And so I think that, you know, in that context, it can be and probably will be received well because doctors want more education about variants of uncertain significance and what do the genes mean. And I'd love to talk with you more offline about that because I have a keen interest in that as well. Now, in my institution, I'm the chairman of the Institutional Review Board for Research. So I'm the person who helps to get the studies approved and I'm aware of what studies there are. But when I see a patient, you know, I sort of do a cross reference and I have a nurse who does some research. She's my research coordinator. And we start to talk about from the minute a patient is diagnosed, what trials might this person be eligible for? And if we're not offering it, who's offering it in the area? And I think that's what more community hospitals need to do. But I think also we need to begin to decentralize the trials such that, you know, if you're the person who wants to talk to a patient and enroll them in this modern era of technology and Zoom, why do they have to travel all the way down to Emerald City to Oz? Why can't we have that conversation right in the community hospital, in the conference room? Why can't we begin to do more where we are rather than take patients out of our system? Because that's another thing. Patients then leave that health system a lot of times to go to tertiary NCI cancer centers. And doctors are disincentivized to do that. You lose that patient, you lose the downstream revenue, you lose the, you know what I mean? So it's a missed opportunity from that standpoint too, because everybody wants patients to stay in their hospital system. And so I think that we need to begin to explore the creative ways to make these trials available and also to connect people to providers that look like them, because like you said, representation matters. So if you're the only Black researcher for a certain radius, if I'm the only Black surgeon for a certain radius, why can't I reach people through this technology? And that's my hope, that out of this, you know, COVID-19 quarantine business and all the telemedicine and Zooming, is that we would design a new way to do research trials so that
But
we
Dr.
don't
Mo,
have to
with
just see.
that being said, though,
Mhm.
Dr. Mo,
Yeah.
what about the researchers looking like me? Because I live in a predominantly African American rural town in eastern North Carolina, and there's a community cancer center right down the road. He's from Pakistan or someplace, you know, I don't know, but none of them were in this community, you know. So it's like when you go to these conferences and
Right.
everything, I don't see researchers. You know, we don't see researchers like me. So we need to start somewhere back further. I mean, the clinicians definitely need it because of institutional bias. They see a Black woman walking there, they think, we'll just get her through this. Just,
Right.
you know, but what about before that point? You know, it's we've got to raise our kids to look at the sciences as well, not just, you know, making $1 million for football and I'm a nurse and I don't make shit, you know, but you have to do that. It's got to start somewhere, but we don't even have researchers that look like me.
You know, we want Dr. Melissa's, right? So,
And we need to get Dr. Melissa to more people and to more places. Like we need to
Exactly.
amplify her through
Right.
the power of social media and telemedicine. And I think that's the grant that we need to start looking at too, is
Right.
how do we do that?
well, yeah, I say we should be where people live, work, play, and pray.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to go to them. But Steph, I don't want to run out of time before you talk about Become.
Become is a initiative that actually came from another metastatic breast cancer patient that is no longer with us. She was an epidemiologist from Miami. I met her at San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium in 2019, and she had done a survey wanting to know about patient solution outcomes regarding clinical trials, everybody. But she noticed that the Black respondents were only like 8%, and she didn't know why. I didn't know either. I did the survey. So she asked me if I could do the survey and aim and focus just on Black people. Well, she passed away before we could get it out of the road, and I thought it was gone, you know, and then it came to me again. Somebody asked to do it. I took it to the Alliance. They looked at it and said they would pick it up as one of their initiatives. So we have Become, which stands for the Black Experience of Clinical Trials and Opportunities for Meaningful Engagement. And that's what I want, meaningful engagement here. So we launched the survey last Wednesday, and it essentially focuses on clinical trials, questions as to why, if we could take away all the barriers, would you? If you wouldn't enroll in the clinical trial, if we took away all the barriers, why wouldn't you? And, you know, some of those discussions, you know, when we had the interviews, we've had, did 32 key informant interviews, a literature review, and then the discussion guides, and now the survey. And it is IRB approved. That's another whole story. But anyway, so it's trying to get at solutions. And the Alliance, there was a lot of nonprofits under the Alliance that said they would support the project. And, you know, we hope that it will get supported. But after that's all said and done and we get the results back, my goal is 500 respondents. I'm far from it. Help me out. And I need 250 Black respondents. So I need 250 Black men and women to take this to mean something. I want it to mean something. I want it to go on from there. I want it to be a poster at San Antonio in December. I want to be able to prove that we have outcomes. But 3 to 6 months after all the synopsis has been done, everything is in, we've notified everybody what the results were. I'm going to come back to you in 3 to 6 months and I'm asking what you did. So it's not like we're going to do this survey, we're going to get the outcomes and here they are and somebody please work on it. No, you told me, nonprofit A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that you were going to do this, this, and this. Now, please show me. I need you to show me what you have done to rectify these problems. And I'm going to hold people's feet to the fire. I'm going to put it out there. Like I said, I have a terminal disease. I have nothing to lose. So with that being said, I want all of those nonprofits out there that service us as Black, African-American people, people of color. I want your organization to represent what you serve. I don't want an all-white organization that says they serve these Black people. Obviously, you can't serve them because you don't know them. You haven't been there. You can go in and say, I know, but you really don't know. So you're going to have to get more people like us or the diverse group in your organization to be able to truly understand, to have people around you that understand the reasons for the clinical trials and what the difference is. you know, everybody's talking about barriers in rural areas. We have a community center, a community cancer center that people can't even get to. There's people here that I know, I've had two women reach out to me and said, I'm not on social media. I can't print that off, but if you'll bring it to me, I'll do it for you. And then one of the two ladies said, I will fill it out, but you'll have to read it to me and I'll give you my answer, because she can't read. So how can we expect women that can't read to read a 30 or 40 page consent regarding a clinical trial? How can you get them to understand it if they don't have that medical literacy level to understand it? So, you know, we need these consents to be dumbed down a lot, as Sheila said, maybe not dumbed down and shortened. You know, hell, an OR consent is 1 page front and 1 page back. You're going to surgery and going to sleep and let somebody work on you.
Right.
But yet still, you're going to be awake through these months and years of a clinical trial, and it's pages and pages and pages and pages long. So the basis of Become is looking at clinical trials and focusing on Black men and women. But anybody with metastatic breast cancer can take it. They can go to the website, nbcalliance.org/become. You can take it from the site. You can print it off. You can, if you don't want to print it or don't have a printer, you can call. There's a number on there that you can call. We will mail you the survey with a stamped addressed envelope to send it back. So there's many ways to take it, because I wanted to focus on those women that you don't see online, like Sheila, all the time. And Sheila, I'm using you as an excuse, but you're there. I mean, you're there. Like the women that have metastatic breast cancer that are always out here. You know what I mean? I want the rural women to know, and men, that you have a voice, and I want to hear that. I want to hear it. I want to hear what you have to say. So that's Become in a nutshell.
Right. I put the link in the chat. So people
Yes, thank you so much.
And you know, Tammy's doing research, we're doing research. I think when we get all this study stuff together, we're going to have a really, really great story to tell about Black women and breast cancer.
I
And
agree.
hopefully, you know, like, you know, go on a roadshow, you know, or make a documentary, right, Tam, we're talking about. But we need to get this word out. We need people to participate in understanding, because I think even people who don't understand a clinical trial, just by taking your survey, they're going to learn. You know, so they're going
Exactly.
to learn more. And I
Exactly.
think that's an education process in itself. So we
And
really,
they're trying to do things that on 6th grade level, sometimes even a 6th grade level is too high.
it is.
You know, I tried to get my survey down to that, but unfortunately I only made it to 8 years. But
Yeah.
you know,
I think we can do a better.
Like I'm a 6-year-old, right? Help me. Like,
I think we can do a better job of explaining where the treatment algorithms are and what the standard of care is,
I agree.
so that patients can see and it can be more transparent. Because, you know, even when I pull up, sometimes I have patients who have a lot of questions. I'll pull up the guidelines and I'll show them, and it's like, if this, then this, if that, then this. And it's like looking at a roadmap, and you follow the different pathways. And it's not something that is easily digestible for everybody. And only a certain patient really wants to be able to look at that chart and be able to follow along with it. But I think that if we start to teach women what their treatment options are and where it's shown and where it's proven and documented, that they can then feel a little bit more empowered to understand the difference between standard of care and the clinical trial is that you're going to get standard of care plus something extra, you know, not just the placebo. And I think
Right.
that gets back to the point of the miseducation and misinformation that patients have, you know.
and you're going to
So
get.
where do you get that? Where do you find the standards of, and I'm just being devil's advocate here. Where do I find the standard of care? If the doctor says, well, you're getting the standard of care, here's the medicines you're going to get. How do I know? Where can I go and make sure that he ain't lying?
Gotcha. So there's different guidelines. The one that most doctors use is called NCCN, National Comprehensive Cancer Network.org. And you pick the type of cancer, and then you pick the stage of the cancer, and then it'll show you the algorithm and the charts, like a flow chart. There are different ones that different doctors use. I think Sloan Kettering and MD Anderson has a totally different one, but they're very similar. And so you can ask your doctor, you know, which guidelines do you use? And can you make me a copy? And you can take it home and you can read it. Sometimes I print it out for patients and actually give it to them, so that when you wrap your head around everything and you're sitting down saying, okay, now what am I getting? And how do I know it's what I'm supposed to get? Here's where you go. here's your resource.
Thank
And
you.
I think that that's a really important thing. But NCCN.org, National Comprehensive Cancer Network.org, is a place to start. And it is not the easiest place to start, but it's the source.
And you know, you guys, every drug we take, every drug, all the breast cancer drugs that we're taking right now, we're in a clinical trial. Tylenol was in a clinical trial. Advil was in a clinical trial. Benadryl was in a clinical. So, you know, if we didn't have the benefit of that information, you know, we'd all be dead right now. I mean, we wouldn't even have made it where we are. So the women came before us, like Tammy, you know, if you hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be here. You saved me because I took adriamycin and Cytoxan. So thank you for that. But think about, you know, all the stuff that we need to take. So it shouldn't be something foreign. It should be something that we embrace. And until we get this data and get the science and understand what works on our Black bodies, we're going to have these bad numbers. And I don't want to. I want to live. We all want to live. And we also want our kids to live and our grandkids. You know, my goal is Belle, 3.5. I got 10 years to get rid of breast cancer before she gets boobs. She's my motivation every day. But we have to do this work but it's, you know, it's for ourselves. Do it for your daughter. Do it for your grandkids, you know, if you're afraid. But we've got to get rid of these fears that we have that are really based on things that aren't true. You know, the sugar
Think
pill.
about a clinical trial, you can always get off of it.
You
If
can always get off.
you think that you're getting a sugar pill, get off, you know.
Right.
But Herceptin sat on the shelf for many, many years, and now it's a drug of HER2 positive.
Yeah.
I was on it for 8.5 years, and I think those before me who was on Herceptin that drug worked for me for 8.5 years. And another fact is 25% of Black patients aren't even offered Herceptin.
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
this
Right.
week, yeah, it's a lot,
Wow.
you know. But yeah, somebody had to be on Herceptin for clinical trial. So, you know, for HER2 positive.
Mm-hmm.
I think
It has
before
changed
me.
everything about how we treat
Yeah.
HER2 positive cancer. Herceptin and Perjeta really has
Yeah.
changed and revolutionized the way we treat, you know, those cancers and the longevity for those patients. So you're absolutely right. Well, we have much work to do.
Yeah, thank you, Genentech. But you know, Sheila, you brought up another point. You know, we do hear a lot that doctors don't ask about trials, don't recruit you, or don't ask you or offer them to you. Well, you know what? We have to put our big girl panties on and ask for them. You know what I mean? If you're not hearing about it and your doctor gives you options or whatever, and I think you've got to bring the conversation to the table as a patient. This is your body. This is your disease. And you have to be the driver of the bus and own this and say, hold on. I don't know, you know, I probably don't know as much about science as you do, doctor, but guess what? I'm challenging you. What have you got for me? Like, is that the best thing? Are there clinical trials available to me? And I know you're scared and you don't feel well and you're petrified of, you know, of dying or just having cancer, but now's the time. If it's not the time, when is the time to stand up to your doctor and say, I want to know everything that's available to me for my disease. What have you got? Is there something that's you know, that science that we can understand? Is there something we can do differently? I want it all. I want the stuff that you're giving your own kid and your own wife and your own sister and your own loved one, right? Like, what are you doing for them? Like, I want that stuff. And if they're in a clinical trial, I want to be in it too. So stand up for yourself. And it's okay to say, you know, I need more information. I want to know more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd just
Wow.
like to add into this, I know we're wrapping up, but, and Ricky, this will be a whole nother show, but I think another thing that we have to address is faith and especially Black women in the church and giving it to God, and they're not claiming it and they're claiming their healing and all of that, instead of choosing life and the proven treatments that can help save the life that they're praying to God
Come on.
to save. And so we have to acknowledge that, you know, God made all humans different and we all have different gifts, and humans have the gift of healing, and doctors are healers, and they are educated and they are trained to help save our lives. And our community is making decisions on people that they trust, mama them, cousin them, auntie them, but they are not the people that have been trained and they're not the experts to actually bringing in faith, who we trust, how we trust them, because every sister that walks in a room and sees another Black woman in that room doesn't necessarily trust her because they don't trust medicine.
Wow.
And so we've got to tear down those stereotypes and start to get in there. And I challenge women. I say, okay, so you're praying to God to save your life, and this is what God has shown you. And you're saying, nah, God, I'm gonna do it my way.
Talk
I'm
about
gonna
that.
trust you. You know, I'm gonna keep praying and fasting. You can pray and fast until you turn green. If God told you to go to the doctor and has provided that doctor that has the medical knowledge and the medical background to save your life, you better take God in the room with you.
Well, that's another episode. It's called
Yeah.
Faith Without Works is Dead.
Dead.
Wow.
That's an episode. Let's plan it.
Man, oh man. Well, the doors of the church are open. And, you know, and anyone who will let them come.
And you know what? And I'm gonna say this too, you know, my calling is in my science, you
That's
know.
right.
You know,
Ministry.
so
Spiritual gift. That's your
my
spiritual
whole career has been like a stream of open doors and unexpected turns, you know, just to get me to the point where I can be influential in this space right now, doing the things that we're doing right now. And, you know, I'm the answer to somebody's prayers, whether it's my mama or my aunt or, you know, my great grandmama, you know, like I'm here on a mission. And I mean, I'm telling you that it's not easy. It's not easy. And so I have the incentive to keep moving forward so that I can find like what's available. The standard of care isn't good enough. You know, I got to find something better. So
right.
I would appreciate it, you know, if you would take it when we find it.
Yes.
Yes. So
Give
I,
me 5, Doc. I know
You
that's
will
right. We
find
the
it.
answer to
You will
somebody's
find it.
prayers.
You will find it.
I love that. She
We
said,
need
"We
to